on my own, I am such a frail creature, bound to fall and fall again. Plant me like a tree by the water, with roots that grow into the stream.
You got no coffee cup.
I drank it already.
We got no. You have to do it with the water bottles. We're out on camping. We're roughing it here, so we got our water bottles. Okay, so this is episode 14. Yes?
I think so.
Of the Olive Tree POC podcast. We said we would probably be filming this at the POC Advance outside, as we said. You can see the river. Look at that. And we joked that if we're lucky, we won't be huddled up in the camper, hiding from the rain.
Yesterday we were.
Well, yeah,
huddled up.
The advance goes Friday through Monday morning, and we decided after last year that we wanted to set up on Thursday so that we could be more relaxed on Friday. And so Thursday night at 10:30, the campground owner came and knocked on our cabin door and said, "Come sit in my basement. There's a tornado warning." So that was our Thursday night.
But the day was beautiful.
The day was beautiful. It was 85 degrees and sunny. Friday, it was 85 degrees and sunny. And Friday night, we were looking out the camper window, hoping the hail didn't get big enough to damage the truck.
Yes.
And then after
it was only this big.
Yes. And then after those two storms went through, the rain stopped. And, well, Saturday was pretty nasty. It was a cloudy, drizzly day. And today is nice and bright and sunny and cool. So you get to see this, You can
we're
see
not
our
covering
POC.
up the truth. We aren't. We're just cold.
Yeah, we're not covering up the truth. Just so here we are, not huddled up in the camper. We are, for the first time, with a live studio audience.
Woo! This is where the clap lights come on.
Yeah, clap, clap, clap. And we had mentioned last week, which technically you watched some point today, which would be last week, and said that we'd be doing updates from the advance. So if you didn't get to see those on Facebook, go to Facebook and you can see we started last year with advanced truths.
Yep. The summary statements of what
we're studying and learning while we're here, and basically one short statements and updates and things like that of the advance. So you can still go back there and look to my feed, and you can get there by going to the front page of the pursuitofcharacter.org website, and it says social media feeds, and you can click on there and see those updates. So what we decided was, well, beside that, I wanted to also mention that you're going to see more listed this week. We did at least one, we'll see how the day goes, but we did at least one recording of what we do, at least part of what we do here, and what we have told you we do at home that we are trying to reproduce through the Olive Tree podcast, and that's the study of God's knowledge and wisdom and application in our life, and then the discussions that we have around that. So we just did a live, basically turned on the recorder while we were doing one of those, and so that's going to be posted as well. And like I said, if we decide to do more, we will get those up. So you may have a lot of opportunity to learn about God and to have some discipleship this week. So look for those. Past that, we decided that we are really winging it this week.
No notes.
No notes, no computer, the laptop isn't even here. And the reason being, again, that we are at our advance, and the advance, as we had mentioned to you before, is for us to look backward at the past year to see what we've done and to evaluate how well we listened and how effective what we did might have been. And then to look forward and see what he has for us this year, what he wants us to stop. Because as we said, if you are more committed to continuing what you started than doing what he says when he says it, then you're likely to get caught up in your own personally designed religion and do things that aren't really on his agenda.
Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean what you were doing wasn't at his instruction, but we shouldn't assume that it continues to be his instruction.
Right.
He changes, each step is directed by him.
Right. Each year, our going out looks different, but as we said, looking backward, we can see how each year led to the next year and how they all work together. And as we said in the episode that you would have watched today, but last week, is that we looked back at when he started us going out, and that's kind of where we're at again. So if that were wrong, we wouldn't have had that teaching for ourselves and that material. We wouldn't have written and published the Hope series. Just basically everything we did wouldn't have gotten done if we weren't listening and willing to take whatever step he has next, to stop worrying about planning all of our own steps. So this week we're talking about the rich young ruler, and I had thought about it first day of Advance, which was technically the setup day, and how quite often, and you've already heard it more than once, us mentioning, well, yeah, it's the rich young ruler rule. And the rich young ruler rule is that there's always that point in bringing people to God or trying to discuss with them how it's more than a moment in time, that it's a choice to change both your lifestyle and what motivates your lifestyle. And so then it's a walk. And so in working with people and having those discussions, we are very aware in every situation where that point was. The thing, just like the rich young ruler.
Everyone has their one thing.
Their one thing that when Christ says, okay, give that up and come follow me, they say, I can't give that up.
Yeah.
So we say that all the time, but it's absolutely valuable. I think that understanding is essential. But there's more lesson in that interaction than just that. And so I said Thursday I was thinking about it, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the idea of what if the rich young ruler's rule, what if his answer would have been different? What if instead of hanging his head and walking away, he had said okay?
Mm-hmm.
What would that look like? Because literally in that scenario, everybody who professes to follow Christ, who says that they've made that decision, was in that position. Because that is the question that Christ asked all of us, which was the point of him telling the story, is to come follow me above all.
Right. But what you were kind of pointing out, because with the different disciples who were previously fishermen, you just have the picture of they just dropped their nets and left their boats and followed Christ, and there wasn't really much to do in between. It was just leaving it behind, whereas that wasn't what Jesus said to them, was just come follow me. But to the rich young ruler, he didn't say that. He said, first go sell all that you possess.
Right, but to the teaching of the disciples, then he said, if you love your father, mother, brother, as we talk about all the time, more than me, you're not worthy of me, and you cannot be my disciples. And so that being the point is that, well, some of us may be fishermen that just have to leave our boat and our nets behind, which they did.
Right.
They still had to leave what was their life, the things that they had
their income,
held most important.
their identity.
All of that they had to walk away from. Now, the rich young ruler as implied by the titles, would have had a lot more that he had to let go or walk away from, but it was still simply, you have to leave the life you had before and the things that you had decided was most important, and take on a life or a citizenship with me and make me most important. And so in the illustration of the rich young ruler, obviously the application was, well, you have to go get rid of everything you have. But the reason it occurred to me that I wanted to talk about it more is something you're hearing us really hit on a lot, because it really is the most resistance we get, is kind of a backwards argument of, well, if I can't let go of it all at once, well, then I guess I'm not good enough, and I wish I was perfect like you kind of statements. And no, it's not instant for everybody that old life is moved away from, or the old things are just gotten rid of. But that commitment and that change in desire is totally different. And see, that's where the rich young ruler's answer went awry, is that he wasn't willing to get rid of the old stuff. Had he done so, that moment, had he said, yeah, I want to follow you, I'm going to go get rid of my stuff, that moment was instantaneous. And his desire in that moment would have switched from all those things that he was going to have to get rid of to simply following Christ, which was his request. So had he answered yes, in that moment, what drives him, what's important to him, would have changed. But in following through on that commitment, he would have had to go sell his estate. He'd have had to get it ready to sell. Because he was told to go sell everything he had. So not just walk away and leave it sitting there to rot. And so he would have had to get it ready to sell. He would have had to sell it.
Find buyers, negotiate prices, whatever.
Exactly.
All the steps that are involved with a very large
estate, right. And so when we talk to people about this change of life, and we say, you have to let go of all of that stuff. And what's worse is the rich young ruler stuff, in theory, was all this really great stuff. We spend more of our time arguing with people to let go of the stuff that's weighing them down, that's a burden, that ruins their life, that wrecks relationships. All these, we always say, these fleshly things that they just won't get rid of.
Yeah.
And and like I said, the common defense is to point back at us and say, well, I wish I was... No, all of us have things that we have to let go of.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're the worst of the worst on the planet, or what we consider the best of the best on the planet. You have an old life, which was the point of comparing, the disciples who just had to walk away from their boat, to him, the rich ruler who would to get rid of his whole estate. We all have a life prior to choosing Christ. But that life is a fallen life. And people need to understand that, yeah, we're going to hold the standard out, as you should if you actually make that transition. The standard of nothing more important than God and Christ is the standard.
Not set by us, set by Jesus Christ and by God.
Right. And softening it doesn't help anybody, and it actually puts a stumbling block in their way, and very well could put blood on your hands. So we aren't going to sidestep it, but we do want you to understand, we had kind of been sent, before we were in the going out stage of the POC ministry, God had already started to direct our steps, having committed to his path, to leave the area I grew up in that I was never going to leave. And even once we had then moved away, there was this desire to go back, and not to move back, but to visit, to move back. Again, for the people that we end up arguing, get rid of the negative stuff, get rid of the darkness. Well, there's all these people in my life. They keep putting it back in, and they keep putting it in front of me, and they keep we left, and we literally left a home we owned in a town we liked, with all the people we liked. And again, you've heard me say it before, we're Michigan, and I love the water, and so I was 2-mile drive. You went 2 1/10 mile, and you were sitting in the lake. So
not a small lake.
No, Lake Huron.
One of
So
the great lakes.
lake, and you would be in a great trouble. So you've heard me say all that before. And so we left that, and the first place we lived going out of that was a little 500 square foot cabin on the lake, but
during the winter.
During the winter, it's a summer rental during the winter because it's where we could get. It was said the whole story is for another time, but it came on really quickly, and so Bethany and Carla went up and lived in the cabin, and I was taking care of how do I deal with the house and the estate, the house and things that we had where we were leaving.
And it's funny actually kind of putting that together with the rich young ruler. So when we got the instruction to leave, it was like, okay, let's do it. And part of leaving was selling the house, which we didn't actually manage to sell until
right, and that was the point that I was bringing up
later.
Is that we followed the steps he directed us on, but when we left we made the commitment and left right before the housing collapse.
Yeah.
And so these two, as I said, were already moved up to the cabin, started a new job. The old job was gone, and I was getting the house ready to sell, and by the time I got it, just ready to be really presentable, you know what I mean, you clean it up for sale, the housing market collapsed.
You couldn't drop
and we
the
couldn't
price.
chase the price down fast enough. Matter of fact, at first we were arguing with realtors, drop it more, no. And they just took time to adjust. But either way, the point was that there were a bunch of things that then happened following his direction, and every time, so we say, okay, we're following God, we go up there, we have to live in a cabin, and the housing market collapsed, and it's obvious that we're going to have to pay the mortgage on that house while we're doing other things and living other places. Mm-hmm. And what do you think we heard from everybody back home every time?
Move back.
Well, maybe God didn't say that. Maybe you should move back. Why are you doing things so hard? And again, if I hadn't believed and if I hadn't committed that God was taking us on these steps, that would have been a huge temptation to me, because that's where I want to be, right? And so every time. And we're talking about every time for 10 years.
Well, yeah. And then when winter turns to summer and you can't afford to stay in the cabin on the lake, you're moving to your camper trailer.
We move into the camper we're using here at the Advance.
I didn't want to be back in that trailer for years afterwards. Like, you can't make me do it.
Last year was the first year we got them back into the camper, and it had been, I don't know, 15 years. So time. Three adults living in a camper that size, 25-foot camper for that time. Yeah. And 2 dogs, right? Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we moved it. We were in a camper. Oh, well, see.
That's not heard God right.
And then we ended up in a motel room for a short period of time. Mm-hmm. Yep, see? And as I said, I can look back and see the entire flow. There is no question in my mind that he directed us to the first place we went when we left our home. Mm-hmm. Because anything less than that, we would have probably questioned. We'd have said, doesn't quite add up. So we went there, and we learned, and we had the experience of the cabin and the trailer, and dealing with people, getting rid of preconceptions, because where we ended up going was a place that we had thought, well, when we retire, it's still by the lake, it's more in the outdoors, that would be the place. And this came up early, and so we said, there we go. Our plan aligns with God. That's great when He aligns with us. That's just great. And
then it was awful.
It was awful. I tell, and no slight, so listen, hear me out. Growing up in Michigan, it was, you don't want to live in Saginaw. It's one of the murder capitals of the world. We were so happy when we got to Saginaw after our trip up north, because the Saginaw people were so nice, and nobody up north wanted us there. Nope. And they didn't even get time to know us, so they had a good reason.
Yeah.
So we...
Usually people have to get to know us before they decide they don't like us.
Right. Not a long time, but at least get to know us.
At least. Give us a chance to prove it.
So we had to get rid of that stuff. We had to move to a place where not just physically or anything else, mentally and spiritually, we needed to be where God put us. And so I can tell you now, I have no desire to go back to where I was never going to leave. My, I don't think I ever wrote a post about it, but we had been discussing it for a while, I think, during our goings out, of confusing our our wants with our needs. We think everything we want, we need. And we tend to think everything we need, we don't want. And so we wanted to stay where we grew up. You're going to hear noise now. And if you pay attention, you go right through here, you'll see why. I'll probably say nothing of much use while they go by, because that might just hog up the mic. So we'll see. Are you watching?
I don't think you can.
Last week you had bees. There he went. See him? So truly, it got to the point where I was just fully aligned with what he wanted, and I have no desire to go.
And then he sent you to Lansing after that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sent us to live in Lansing, back in a
worst place
smaller
in
house
his
with
mind.
neighbors right here.
In the city.
Right. And,
Pit of hell.
Yeah. Yeah. And
For 5 years.
Again, that was this closed-in environment. We were raised where we were the only house in an entire mile. So a close neighbor is a half a mile away. And we had them literally a driveway between houses, and just noise all the time. Took forever to adjust where I could sleep. But like I said, I could see each step of the move. The first step going up north was not where he had planned for us to end up, but we took it, and as we mentioned in his instructions, which he actually gave after this little tour that we took, one of the instructions was what we read last week about not demanding he reveal his providence, but trusting the next step. So we trusted the next step. Go up north. Great. That's second choice. Retirement. That's where we want to be. So you chose wisely, God. And then, you know what? You might have to live in your trailer a while. Okay, well, it's still, I can still get to the lake every day. I just take a quick shot. You might have to live in the motel in the middle of the state, way away from the lake, on the edge of the city. Okay, God, are you sure? But it was never doubting. And like I said, now we can look back and see how, being a gracious God, he walked us away from what was dear to us. But the question was still as simple as that. Leave everything you have and follow me. And we don't know where he's got us going yet. We know that he stopped us where we're at 5 or 6 years. He's directed us into Pursuit of Character now 10 years ago. And we're just pursuing whatever step he puts in front of us. But again, the point for you to understand is everybody has the things they have to let go of. And I can tell you, the quicker you do it, the less likely you are to have to live in a motel.
So also the way that actually selling the house in Port Huron went, it was another lesson in faith of, we knew for a fact that house was never going to sell until God said it was time. Because everything that never happens, except for an anomaly that maybe one realtor would experience one of these things across their entire career, all those things happened.
Right, when we finally did sell it, it had been, like I said, 10 years. And we contacted Carla's college roommate, who is now a realtor in that area, and said, hey, would you give a shot selling this? And we won't
blame you if you can't.
Right. We said, we understand, it's been a long time. The house, it wasn't the house. Don't get me wrong. The house had been cleaned up, new carpet, everything, and unused. It was ready to go. There were other factors. So we told her all the experiences that we had. She said, I've been doing this a while, and you might run into one of those experiences as a realtor, but not two, much less all of those negative experiences. And sometimes it was two in one shot, one seller or one buyer. And but what, like I said, in looking back, and this is a discussion that we're definitely going to have one day, because we've had it and I've never done anything with it, kind of like light and darkness, light and shadow, is we need to develop to the point where our hindsight becomes foresight. And not that we have his providence, but that we're so in line that we're really just seeing his future in front of us.
Yeah.
And
here
comes another one. You ready? This one isn't quite as loud, so I'm not going to be overly worried about it.
But you were talking about then God leading us.
That was just his head, went right across there.
Sorry, I couldn't see him. To where we are now, and just the different mindset that we have since before it was official that we were going to be the keepers of this place. I think what I really learned through selling of the house in Port Huron was how God is in control. And that when we trust him, like when we really see everything as his and we are just the keepers of it, it takes all the stress and all the anxiety out of it. So it was really, if this is the place you have for us to operate from and to manage as your place to be used for your kingdom, for your work, however, whatever you assign us to do, then make it happen. And if it isn't, we don't want any part of it. That was our request going in. And then shortly after that, going through COVID and having the Port Huron house sell right before COVID, because it would have been a nightmare trying to go across the state and take care of that property, which is what we were doing, was driving across the state to maintain this place. And the timing of that and God's care for us in that. And then having the job at MSU that he led me into and then led me out of. Really trusting him. So all these moving parts that for us, it's like what's going on and what's happening. But to see God's design in it, because we can only see it looking back, that I could have been terrified, like, if I give up this income, then how will we pay the bills? How will we hold up this responsibility that we have to pay for the things that God's entrusted to us? But God had told me before I ever even got that job, that the job was not our source of provision. He is. So I never have to be afraid of losing or gaining when I'm just trusting in God. And that is the rich young ruler's rule. The lesson that he wouldn't learn. Not that the rule, how we apply it, but no matter what your one thing is that you're holding on to, if you won't let it go to trust God, you can't be saved, because we are saved through faith. It's saved through that confidence in God. So that was just a really valuable lesson, because now I'm not afraid of what I might lose or gain in the physical world. It's, if God entrusted it to us for a time and a purpose, we'll have it as long as it serves his purpose. And if at some point we no longer maintain possession of it, then we no longer needed it for whatever his purpose is.
Well, I wanted to do the disclaimers of everything we just talked about. You also have to be careful about, because it can very quickly become you testing God, or you trying to bully God. So, well, God, if you don't want this, shut it down.
Right.
And you're actually just doing what you think you should do or what you want to do. And you've protected yourself, because if God don't want it, he'll shut it down.
Right.
Which maybe not. Maybe he'll let you learn about being in control by letting it go until you feel the pain. And so we want to be really careful about it from either direction. Okay, if you want it, make it happen. Well, I sit here on my duff,
right,
and wait for somebody to come knocking on the door. I say, guess what? We started up a ministry, and we rented you a building, and we got you a staff and a car, and do you want to come out and do it now? And the answer will probably be, well, can I come on Sunday?
For just 30 minutes?
Yeah. So we want to be really careful that we don't take lessons that he gives us, and that we don't use this, what we're talking about here, as a way to get what we want or to test God, because we're instructed against both. I also wanted to be clear that we say there's always that thing that people get to when we're dealing with them, and they won't give that up, so they turn around. don't confuse that to necessarily be a single thing. Most of the time, that thing they won't give up is control.
Mm-hmm.
Which can mean I have this job planned, I have this spouse planned, I have this house planned, I have this living by the lake planned, I have this whole list of things.
And I'm not willing to risk God saying that any part of that isn't part of his plan.
Right. So there may be the thing, as we've talked to you about before, it may be that, well, I'm already engaged to this guy, and if I follow this road, I might have to stop that. Well, that might be the thing. And we've said, well, I've already got my career kind of headed that direction. I've got this whole plan to get there, and not that you're telling me that God doesn't want me to do that, but if I ask him, he might say no.
Right.
So I'm just going to walk away. Those are kind of individual, but they're still tied to this self and this control. Mm-hmm. So at the core of everything that he asks you to give up is control and self-importance.
Yeah.
So as we have talked about, yeah, it's in the book, so we haven't done it on a podcast or anything, is the description or the understanding of why does he say, about your mother, father, sister, brother, and all those things. Well, really, that's about self-identity, too. You get value from being this person's mother, or this person's brother, or this person's son, and you aren't supposed to get value from that. Are you supposed to enjoy it? Sure, because he created it. But your identity is supposed to be 100% Christ. If you've made that claim, and it was real. Mm-hmm. There's only one truth, as you heard us say way back in episode 2. And faith only exists as you walk in that truth, mm-hmm. which you heard us say in episode 3. And through that walk, you find favor in the eyes of God, which you heard in episode 4.
5. We
5?
Skipped. We
We
did
did?
purgatory.
Oh, that's right. We got impatient, did purgatory. So, like I said, the thing that I really wanted to get into today, because we did talk to you last week about the ingredients of revival, the confession, repentance, and redemption. And that's all wrapped up in that one question, mm-hmm. that one statement to the rich young ruler. Give up all you have, sell all you have, so confess what's yours, sell it, so turn away from it, change direction on that path, and follow me alone.
Mm-hmm. And a couple of things that I thought of dealing with that is a different parable that Jesus told about 2 sons, where the father gave the first son an instruction, and he said no, he wouldn't do it. But then later he decided, no, I guess I probably will do that. And he went and did what his father asked. Well, the father had gone to the second son and said, do this thing. And the son said, yes, I will. But then he went away and he didn't do it. And so Jesus' question was, which of these actually did what was right, with the father? And so going along with the rich young ruler, we don't know. Like, he walked away sad that day, but we've talked about this before. We don't know if he ever changed his mind, if he ever got to the point where he was like, you know what, this is stupid. What's all this stuff doing for me? I really want eternal life. And he might have done that. On the other hand, what if his answer had been yes, but then when he was like, how much work is this going to be to sell all this stuff, and I don't really want to give it up, and I really am busy, and it's not really a good time for me, so I'm going to do it, but maybe next year, maybe when the weather changes, or just all the excuses that we make, that we tell ourselves, we didn't say no, but actually it was a no.
Well, right, because what his answer really was, it wasn't just that he turned his head and walked away. When he asked the question, as we often do, the answer that he wanted was in the question. So what he wanted was, I will follow you.
Which put
small
him in,
print at the bottom.
Put him in control.
In my terms.
Yeah.
I want you to advocate for you to allow for my terms to rule our relationship where I follow you. And that in itself should reveal the problem. And, as I said, we're tying it a little bit to the discussion about the revival idea, personal revival, as we said we were going to start talking to you about. And, a lot of professing Christians will tell you, don't do New Year's resolutions. First thing, you shouldn't do it for that, you should do it for God. Of course, they don't do anything for God usually, but the motivation behind that, making that statement is, well, really, if you think about it, a New Year's resolution is a change of position or a change of opinion, not a change of lifestyle. So in the heat of the moment, in the emotion of New Year's, you get excited and you say, I am not going to be fat anymore, so I'm just going to stop eating chocolate. And you're all, and by 3 days later, you're
binge eating
chocolate. Because in the heat of the moment, in the emotional fervor, you had a change of opinion. But you had no commitment to change your lifestyle. And so resolutions don't work, and statistically, they don't work. Because that's all they are. They aren't, okay, my lifestyle before, I'm going to sell.
There's nothing
I'm
resolute
going to walk away
about them.
from it. Right. And so revival is not resolutions. Commitment to following Christ is not a change of opinion. Mm-hmm. It's getting rid of your opinion.
Yeah.
It's saying, I have no opinion anymore. I choose to follow you. And as you've heard us talk about, we spend most of our time arguing opinions. We say, well, when I read the manual says Christ has victory over all, including our sin. That's fact. And you say, but my opinion is that sin's really hard, and if I can get over it, it'll take me a lifetime.
And you should watch the live video that we did, because we read a sermon from G. Campbell Morgan all about sin and its true definition. So useful, that really exposes that for the lie that it is.
Yeah, and we had, as I said, a live discussion. I think you'll find it interesting. You can look at how well we do at reproducing it through these, but that's actually what we're talking about, is this change of intent.
And I was thinking, going back to those two sons, isn't it so much worse to be in the position of agreeing with the truth? Having your initial response be, yes, that's right, I agree, this is true, I'm going to do it, and then to walk away and not do it. That is worse than saying, no, I don't agree with that to begin with. I don't think that's true. To outwardly rebel and just say, no, I don't think that, both of them put you in a bad place, but to actually say, I see this is true, I agree that it's true, I'm embracing it as true, but I'm not going to change anything to come in alignment with the truth. I'm going to willingly rebel against this thing that I've agreed is true and life. What a worse thing that is.
Right, so as you said, it's not just your change in intent. Your intent should change when you've changed your identity. As we talked about, when you're suke, your psyche is now Christ-centered. Your intent is to please Christ. Your intent is to live for Him. Your intent is to serve the purpose of your creation, which is to serve God. And because we fell and nobody serves God at birth, our job became first to choose Him for ourselves, and second, to offer Him to others, and to have discussions like we have on the Olive Tree, to all the things that get in the way of choosing God and living a godly life, which again is simply the evidence of your choice.
Well, and what we read last week of somebody who is actually Spirit-filled, you can't keep them quiet about God. So when we see this attitude toward the gospel like it's this inconvenient truth that we're kind of embarrassed to share, that probably is a good indication that we don't know God, we haven't seen Him, and we don't have Him. That's the only reason why you wouldn't want to share it. If it's transformed your life, nobody would be able to shut you up.
Well, and as we often do, and our studio audience gets to experience this firsthand often enough, is if you had a moment's honesty and looked into your life, you would see how many things, even within a day, excite you enough to at least share with your coworker, or to tell your family when you got back home, or something like that. And then if you have another moment of honesty, look back at your week and tell me how often that happened with Christ, who should be a continuous, nonstop excitement to you. But even worse, how much time do you spend sharing that excitement with yourself? How much time do you spend enjoying the gift that he's given and showing your appreciation through true worship? And again, I don't mean getting out and singing. Half you people probably can't sing and nobody wants to hear it. But true worship is, again, as we said, this humble, submissive place where you acknowledge him for who he says he is. You show your appreciation. You acknowledge that you don't have a right to his grace, and you kind of have a POC advance every day. How did I do today? I should have. Hear me? Should. Let me say it again. Should have done perfect, but I didn't.
Well,
but I'm not okay with that.
Matthew Henry did that every day.
Yeah.
Every day before he would go to bed, he would reflect back on the day and repent of whatever he did that was not in alignment with God, and then look to do better the next day. And that wasn't an act of legalism. No, that was an understood teaching. David did it. Yep. Paul did it. Well, him and his dad would read a verse from Psalm 119 every single day. Right. They lived kind of by that model. Right, and it ties to the conversation that we had in Light and Shadow, that of the bringing of the light and the removal of the light at creation, and that's what our days are supposed to look like. We get up at the beginning of the day and we start with the light. We start looking at the tree of life and we say, this is what our day should look like. We're looking only at truth. We're looking only at him. We're looking only at pleasing him, and we're not even tempted. We're not even interested in this other tree back here. That's what we're supposed to do, and that's what Henry did, David did, Paul did, every single day. And then when night came, it was, okay, so how many times did I look back at that other tree? And not making an excuse for ourselves and going like this and pitching our little flesh. Actually feeling conviction and guilt for having failed him that way. And confessing and repenting. Again, we've told you before, we run into people that are concerned about repenting too much. We've heard pastors preach it from the pulpit that it's a sin to continue to confess after you've been saved, which is bunk. Find me the scripture again. Of course we should be sorry every day for everything we do to fail him. And so that's what they did at the end of the day, is they did POC Advance every day. They looked back and said, okay, so I got up this morning and my intent was to serve him this whole way. Where was I not listening? Where did he tell me to step right and I stepped left? Because the point is, if your intent is sincere, if your identity has changed, you don't intend, you have no desire, you aren't even going to make an excuse to allow for doing it tomorrow. Right. And so that's what takes you down that road. And you want a good way to grow, a way to continue walking on that path and not stepping off the side and having your foot slip. You walk down that narrow path every morning. You take a really good look at the path you can see. And you do that through the tree of life. You do that through the manual. You do that through prayer. And you say, today, it looks like this. And you don't leave that in your room. You take it with you out into the battlefield. Right. And you're looking to him for guidance throughout the day.
Right, because again, one of the excuses we get, well, that's a lot to carry. I mean, they don't say it that way, but it's really hard. There's all these people, and they're not all Christians, and I work in this kind of place, and yada, yada, yada. So basically, they're calling Christ a liar and saying that yoke's kind of heavy, God, so can I just leave it at home when I go to work? Or, when I go to play, or when I go to see my family, or whatever it is, that yoke's just a little too heavy. And like I said, Scripture says the opposite. It says that leaving that at home and taking on the world is the heavy load. So stop it.
Just stop it.
So we are going to continue down this road of helping with personal revival, revisiting messages that he gave us and discussions that he gave us over the last 10 years where he sent us out, and to every new thing he gives us. And sharing them with you in discipleship. I'm going to keep reiterating to you, you need to find a solid source of mentorship and discipleship to help you walk on that path, to help you look back at your day. And again, not looking back in your darkness saying, this is what I did before I got saved, and so knock it off.
Yeah.
But definitely you need to have someone discipling you, and that doesn't mean when you have time around your work and your play and your family and your, movie to schedule, whatever it is. No, follow me first.
Yeah. Forsaking all others.
Give up all that you have and follow me first. Just like we said when it says believe. You must first believe he exists. It says you must believe he exists. And the obvious implication in the entire discussion there is you must first believe he exists. Well, you must also follow him first. So when you say, well, let me check my schedule, you've already failed. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have obligations where, as we've said before, you gave your yes, and your yes needs to stay yes, or you are a liar. Father of lies is who? But too often we have way too many things on our schedule that we say, I just can't change that. I just can't move that. And even if that were true, then it's like, okay, well then next week where it's not on the schedule yet, let's put Christ first. And that can be scheduled around it. These are all issues that are common. They're issues that we're going to take issue with. And
because they are the diversions off of the way of life onto the broad path that leads to death.
Right.
And we always need to be taking issue with that.
So, as I said, we are maybe going to shoot another one, live thing, but we'll see how that goes. We are hoping to have an interesting announcement that's come out of this advance, but we'll see. We're waiting on a meeting about that today. Other than that, reserve the right to disappoint man,
so that you may never disappoint God.
There you go. See you next time.
Lord, I have sought you in vain and proudly carried your name on filthy rags of my own righteousness, displayed in hopes the world would be impressed. Oh, I have been such a fool, enslaved by my own self-rule. Lord Jesus, save me from this tyranny. I traded for your yoke of liberty. Be the first and the last and the in-between. Myself I deny, so that Christ may live in me, and as I daily die in answer to the call, be more than mine.